Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Middle East Dialogue 2024. This year, we're hosting this conference in Villanova University, Philadelphia. And our next speaker is Soumya Barham. She's Associate Professor from Department of Communication, University of Colorado, Denver. And she's going to presenting the Transnational Muslim Brotherhood and Global Political Discourse, challenging the rhetoric of Islam versus democracy. Let's welcome her.
Thank you so very much. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm delighted to be back and participate in this very important conversation and everything that's happening in the Middle East and North Africa region. I want to start with providing a context to my presentation today, and the way in which I would like to do it is by reading a few excerpts from this article that hopefully you can see, which was published in Al Jazeera in 2023, specifically August of 2023. What does the future hold for the Muslim Brotherhood? And I would like to read a few excerpts from this. Things are looking rather bleak for the Muslim Brotherhood right now, but they have overcome similar decades. They have overcome similar crises before. Joe's Wagemakers, an associate professor of Islamic and Arabic studies at Utrecht University and an MB specialist, told Al Jazeera. Wagemakers believes the Muslim Brotherhood is still relevant, even though it has less space to operate in the changing politics of the Middle East, he says, and it can always expand operations in Western countries. Now, according to Amr El-Afifi, an MB specialist and one of the authors of Broken Bonds, The Existential Crisis of Egypt's Muslim Brotherhood, the group has grappled with three concurrent crises: an identity crisis, a legitimacy crisis, and a membership crisis. The organization was shaped by the successive repressive waves it endured and thereby failed at many junctures to define itself on its own terms and offer a comprehensive social and political outlook or manifesto, argued El-Afifi. And then this article ends with this very important paragraph. Just a moment. Sometimes technology often acts up. I'm not too sure why I'm unable to scroll down. So this is the final paragraph, which really sets the context for my presentation today. So despite the challenges that I just shared and read from this article facing the Muslim Brotherhood and the bleak picture drawn by scholars of political Islamist movements, Wagemakers affirms that as long as there are socially conservative societies with corrupt and autocratic leaders in the Middle East, people will want Islamist opposition groups that strive to make things better. The MB is down, but not out, he said. So with that as context, just a moment, I'll stop sharing and bring my slides forth. So my presentation today is an overview of my current book project, which focuses, of course, on the Egyptian Muslim Brotherhood. Specifically, in this project, I focus on the transnational rhetoric or the transnational communication of the Egyptian Muslim Brotherhood. It's a work in progress. So what you will hear today is an overview, some preliminary findings, but what I'd really like to focus on is really the significance and importance of doing this work, considering what is happening in the Middle East and North Africa today. So the question I ask in my book project is it possible to forge a liberal democracy in the Middle East and North Africa, that is the MENA region, in which Islamic political ideas and movements have a central place. Although a much debated question in US and European academic and policy circles, this separation between the sacred and the secular, specifically the rhetoric of Islam versus democracy, is the product of a classical US Eurocentric liberal ideology. In the MENA region, though, Islam and politics are endlessly intertwined in complex ways. This project focuses on political Islam or Islamism, and I use these terms interchangeably, although I, of course, acknowledge that these are extremely nuanced and complex concepts. So I particularly focus using the lens of communication and media on the transnational rhetoric of the Egyptian Muslim Brotherhood, one of the most important modern Muslim organizations with a distinct ideological and political project. And through a rhetorical study of the transnational discourse in EquanWeb, which is the Muslim Brotherhood's official English language website, with Western societies as its stated and targeted audience, the study shows how a strategic political actor, such as the Egyptian Muslim Brotherhood, in the decade from 2005 to 2015, of its move from the margins of Egyptian politics to the center and back to the margins, used its transnational rhetoric, A, to intervene in the dominant US Eurocentric discourse of Islam versus democracy, and B, to position its Islamist project for a transnational audience. And my hope is that this book is important for tracking the future possibilities of democracy in MENA, led or supported by Islamists. So to elaborate, by interpreting how the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt specifically used EquanWeb to rhetorically position itself, and the various rhetorical strategies it used against the backdrop of the Arab uprisings, I want to show how it problematizes the rhetorical framing of this binary of Islam versus democracy to propose to the West, specifically the United States and Europe and several countries in Europe, that these countries and these governments must make a paradigm shift and culturally situate the rhetoric of democracy and liberalism when considering Islamists' role in MENA politics and their engagement in the region. Additionally, this study also highlights the rhetorical affordances of transnational, non-mainstream discursive spaces, such as websites, for Islamists in authoritarian MENA societies. By focusing on the rhetoric in EquanWeb, this study therefore demonstrates that websites function as counter-public spheres or parallel discursive arenas and sites of resistance to enable Islamists to critically engage with dominant and often reductive rhetorical framings of Islamism and influence global political discourse. So my book nuances how we understand and theorize the rhetoric of Islamism and challenges US Eurocentric narratives of the relationship between and the future of religion and politics in the MENA region. So now I want to get into the significance of this book, a little bit of the background, a little bit more in depth into the background that situates or sort of frames this book project and really the rationale behind it. So Western and non-Western scholars of political Islam have described the Egyptian Muslim Brotherhood as a moderate movement that attempts to reconcile pre-modern Islamic law with the modern nation state and has evolved to embrace certain tenets of democratic life. Considered Egypt's oldest Islamist Sunni Muslim group, the Muslim Brotherhood was founded in 1928 by Hassan al-Banna, a school teacher. Historically, the relationship between the Muslim Brotherhood and secular dynastic or nationalist Egyptian governments has been one of conflict primarily. Following plots or alleged plots of assassination, the reasons have included exclusion of the Muslim Brotherhood from the mainstream political process, banning of the organization, and systematic suppression of Muslim Brotherhood members by state officials. In the years preceding the 2011 Egyptian uprising, the organization's campaign for democratic reforms placed it in opposition to the authoritarian President Hosni Mubarak. Now, the Muslim Brotherhood rose as one of the most organized groups in the Egyptian political scene following Mubarak's ousting, won the parliamentary elections in 2011, and Mohammed Morsi, a leading Muslim Brotherhood figure, was sworn in as president on June 30th, 2012. Morsi, however, was ousted following a coup led by the Egyptian security forces under General Abdel Fattah al-Sisi's command on July 3rd, 2013. Now, US Eurocentric academic and policy discourses around the Egyptian Muslim Brotherhood are replete with conspiracy theories, and the rhetoric surrounding it is actually as diverse as it is contradictory. For instance, the Muslim Brotherhood, on the one hand, has been labeled a radical movement that is hostile to the West and an illegal non-state actor. And on the other, a civil association and the Egyptian government's most popular opposition. Islamic extremists, on the one hand, have accused the Muslim Brotherhood of promoting elections instead of jihad, framed as a holy war, while Egyptian governments have continually taken measures to vilify the Muslim Brotherhood by constructing a narrative attempting to link it to violence and extremism. Furthermore, since September 11th, 2001, and bolstered by the rise of ISIS, specifically around the 2014-2016 rise of ISIS, rhetorical framings in US and European media, popular culture, and certain academic and policy discourses have reduced Islam to violence and extremism. So any organization or movement with an Islamic ethos and political ambitions has had an uphill relationship with Western societies, especially the United States, which is one of the most important players in the MENA region. So in sum, the Egyptian Muslim Brotherhood has encountered the disparaging rhetoric of the Egyptian state, the West, specifically US and Europe, and Islamic extremists since its inception. This has significantly impacted the transnational identity of the organization, complicated the discourse surrounding the potential of a liberal political order in MENA and the Egyptian Muslim Brotherhood's role in it, and consequently, the organization's relationship with the United States. So, my book situates the Egyptian Muslim Brotherhood as an Islamist counterpublic and explores how the rhetoric in Ikhwan again, which positions Western societies as its target audience, has positioned the organization for a transnational audience. And to reiterate, counterpublics are non-dominant social groups that use parallel or non-mainstream discursive arenas to circulate oppositional interpretations of their identities, needs, and interests. So the rhetorical study of these parallel discursive spaces enables exploration of the possibility of rhetoric to gain adherence, stir counter-arguments, and/or create opportunities for dialogue. And finally, transnationalism is an analytic that accounts critically for the movements of discourses across geopolitical borders, challenges dominant narratives, and explores the potential complicity of these dominant discourses to, whether intentionally or unintentionally, reproduce global geopolitical hierarchies. In addition, this study focuses on the rhetoric produced in Equanweb in the years preceding um, and following the 2011 Egyptian uprising, namely two critical phases in the organization's modern history. A, its ascent to political prominence from being a political banned organization during Hosni Mubarak's presidency, and B, its return to the margins of society and politics in Egypt only a year after its apparent democratic rise to power. So by using the lenses of rhetoric, counter-publicity, and transnationalism, this book illuminates or hopes to illuminate how a strategic political actor such as the Egyptian Muslim Brotherhood in the decade, which is from 2005 to 2015, of its move from the margins of Egyptian politics to the center of Egyptian politics, and again, back to the margins, used its transnational rhetoric in Equanweb, which is a parallel, non-mainstream discursive space, to engage with and intervene in the dominant, often West-centric rhetoric of Islam versus democracy, and to position its ideological and political project for a transnational audience. And in conclusion, and in addition, it contributes to our understanding of what this means for the rhetorical affordances of transnational digital spaces for Islamist counterpublics in the Middle East and North Africa. So to sort of bring this all together, what I hope to do with my current study is to be able to explore the rhetoric of the Egyptian Muslim Brotherhood, specifically in a non-dominant space, which is a website, because often websites are not considered to be the most interactive transnational spaces or space, but it's important to pay attention to the Egyptian Muslim Brotherhood's rhetoric in this supposedly non-dominant space, because this space also has the potential to counter and challenge the global political discourse and the varied discourses around the Egyptian Muslim Brotherhood, or at least to explore to see what this space is doing to the larger identity of the Egyptian Muslim Brotherhood, specifically going back to a momentous time for the Egyptian Muslim Brotherhood, which was between 2005 and 2015, to mainly go back and see if there are lessons in there that we could use today to understand the role of the Egyptian Muslim Brotherhood today, although the future might seem bleak, and to also be able to see what these lessons can propose for the future of Islam and democracy, that is the coming together of Islam and democracy for the Middle East and North Africa region in forthcoming years. So I will end with that, and thank you so much. And I'm looking forward to answering your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Somia. Is there any question from the online participants? Is there any closing mark from you? Oh, here, the Dr. Farhad has raised her hands.
Yeah.
I will get you on the podium. You can unmute yourself and talk. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the lecture and for the effort, the scholarly effort you are doing.
Yeah.
I have two observations. Number one, intellectually, in the Muslim Brotherhood, I agree with you that it is mostly or predominantly a moderate movement.
Mm-hmm.
But I think one can define two main streams One relates to Hassan al-Banna and the other relates to Sayyid Qutb.
Absolutely.
Yeah, both of them are great men in many regards, with some reservations. But in any way, Hassan al-Banna was more pluralistic, was more open.
Sure.
For example, he was a close friend to the most prominent political leader, a Christian leader in Egypt.
Mm-hmm.
And that Christian leader was the only politician who walked in his funeral, by the way. Sayyid Qutb, on the other hand, was, although he was a great thinker, literature guy, etc., more educated, highly educated than Hassan al-Banna, but because he was jailed twice, and in the second jailing, there are stories about torture, etc., etc., that made him more extremist.
Sure.
So I think one has to distinguish between these two. Now,
Absolutely.
now the other observation. I'm sorry, I will try to be very quick and not to take much more time. In
Sure.
my opinion, what can be called Islamist movement in thinking needs to be based on three streams. The literal interpretation of religion, and this is the mainstream now. And the second one is the rational interpretation of religion that goes back to Ibn Rushd. And the third one, the rational interpretation goes beyond the literal interpretation and can be very open to any modern issue. The third one is the Sufi interpretation, in which the concentration is on purifying the inner self, and this is what most people forget about Sufism, uniting yourself with all humanity and uniting yourself with the whole universe. That's all. Thank you.
No, thank you so very much for both of these observations. To respond to both, in fact, I'd like to start with the first one. You're absolutely right. The Muslim Brotherhood itself, of course, in my presentation, it was very difficult in this small short span of time to really, it's a very complex organization. It has a very complex history. It has a very complex geopolitical sort of dynamic associated with it. But in my book project, in the several chapters that are included in the book, I do talk about the diversity within the Egyptian Muslim Brotherhood, just the Muslim Brotherhood in itself, and also the Egyptian Muslim Brotherhood, about Qutb, about Hassan al-Banna, and that the Muslim Brotherhood is not really a monolith. There have been more pluralistic, discourses within it. There have been extremist versions within it. So yes, you're absolutely right, and I do pay attention to it, and I do include those specific, ideas and facts, in fact, in my book. And also the effort is. For me, as I'm analyzing these rhetorical strategies that the Muslim Brotherhood was using between 2005 and 15, is also to be able to capture whether that diversity is present in its transnational rhetoric. How is it positioning itself to the world? Is it capturing that diversity, or is it trying to stay away from, say, for instance, its more extremist sort of inclinations or discourses? So yes, I completely agree with you. I'm trying to capture that in my book project. In fact, even today, and I'm not even talking just about its political ideology or ideology per se, but within the movement today, there are diverse ways in which the organization is being run. And there's also this whole generational sort of difference, in the way the Muslim Brotherhood is being run. So yes, absolutely, and I totally pay attention to that really complex history and current nuances and dynamics of the Egyptian Muslim Brotherhood. In terms of the second, yes, I also agree. Like I said, this whole idea of Islamism or political Islam, these are extremely complex and nuanced concepts. Thank you very much for reminding us of these three strands. Again, it's one full chapter in my book where I discuss Islamism itself, where I do talk about its nuances and complexities. I will remember to include the Sufi aspect of it for sure. So thank you again. But again, to respond to you, yes, I do pay attention to that. But sometimes, to be able to proceed with a larger project as an academic, we need to sort of create sort of a boundary that frames how we are defining a particular concept, which is extremely complex. So I've also had to do that in my book, but I'm not sort of denying or forgetting the fact that the term itself is quite complex and nuanced. So thank you again.
Can I say a very quick note? Because
Sure.
first of all, I agree with all your comments, but I want to adjust what I said about Said Qutb just to be more objective and fair. I wouldn't, as I said, categorize Said Qutb as an extremist.
Extremist,
But
yes, of course.
no. Well, يعني, I go back and say Said Qutb is generally moderate, but some of his writings are extremist.
Absolutely. I completely
So
agree.
this is just to be accurate about it. Thank you.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you very much. I agree with you on that. Yeah, and it's very important when you're talking about these figures, when you're talking about MENA politics, when you're talking about the Muslim Brotherhood, it's very important to be at least in the way you are presenting your understandings and your facts, or one's understandings or one's facts, to be as accurate as possible or as clear as possible. So I appreciate your comment.
Thank you very much. Is there additional question coming from the online participants? If no, would you like to add some closing remarks?
Well, my closing remarks are really, it has been, I mean, it's really difficult to capture, everything that you're trying to do with such a difficult topic in 30 minutes. And I hope we could have we had more time for these really rich conversations. But I do hope that because this is going to be archived, that there are more people who are going to watch this, and also for the participants who have joined us online or maybe also in person. I can't see the room, so thank you so much for being there. But if there are any additional questions or thoughts or comments or feedback you may have, because I'm in the process of writing this book, please feel free to share that, or keep in touch with me via email. My profile is available with I think the MED platform. So yeah, thank you again for being here, and I'm hoping to continue participating and having more robust conversations with and continuing this discourse on the Middle East and North Africa with the.
It seems like Mr. Farahad still have an additional question. You can unmute yourself and continue.
Oh, okay, sure.
Yeah, I'm sorry to talk again, but since there is a little bit of time, another, I think, fair observation on the Muslim Brothers movement in Egypt, because things were very unfair to them, or mostly unfair to them, jailing, torture, etc., etc. This made of course, you know that the Muslim Brothers is a core organization and then a very fluid umbrella organization.
Yes.
So the core organization reacted to the security problems and security issues in a way that made them a closed tribe. And this is the opposite of Hassan al-Banna. This is the opposite of Hassan al-Banna, who was very open. Although
Sure.
he was less educated than many of the leaders to come after that, but he was a genius in many ways. So this is the main criticism of the movement of the Muslim Brothers, to act as a closed tribe. On the other hand, they express the, how should I put it, the root feelings in terms of aspirations of the people, of the Egyptian people, the Muslim people, Arab people, towards a civilization of their own identity, a civilization that is not imitating the West in anything. So they have their positives and they have their negatives. Yeah. Thank you.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for these comments. And I hope we can, keep conversing on this topic and continue this conversation. Well, thank you
Thanks
so much.
everyone for having time with us. We will have our next session at 4 p.m. and this session will be closed now. Thank you for coming.
Thank
See you
you.
next time.